Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is an awesome and precious time for me to be your master of ceremony in this morning, on Tuesday, the 27th of October 2020, in the first International Conference on the Teaching of English and Literature 2020, held by the English Education Postgraduate Program University of Bengkulu and Karino Chef Muda Indonesia Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, our event today consists of three main agendas. First, opening ceremony. Second, the first international conference on the teaching of English and literature seminar. And the third, closing. Ladies and gentlemen, let's start our opening ceremony today by saying Basmala. Our first agenda is singing the Indonesian national anthem. Our next agenda is an opening speech from the chairman of the first International Conference on the Teaching of English and Literature 2020, Mr. Dr. Azwandi M.A. For Mr. Azwandi, time is yours.
Sorry. On behalf of the English Language Education Graduate Program, Faculty of Teacher Training and Faculty of Teacher Training and Education, Bengkulu University, I'd like to welcome first Vice Dean for Academic Affairs, Associate Professor Lutfi Firdaus, and I also would like to welcome Associate Professor Adelina Binti Asmawi, University of Malaya, Malaysia, Associate Professor Z. Firdaus Adnan, University of New England, Armidale, Australia, Professor Safnil Arshad, Graduate Programs of English Education, FKIP UNIP. First of all, I would like to speak on behalf of the the coordinator of the English language education postgraduate program, Prof. Safnil, since he is one of the keynote speakers. So I'm taking over his place to give a brief speech in this opening ceremony. The first ICOTEL International Conference of sorry of teaching and English learning is the implementation of one core program of the English language education graduate program. That is to become a global academic society for academic advancement. Uh, this event, therefore, is an important occasion in which international scholars share ideas, experiences, and research findings in the fields of English and literature education and linguistics. My special thanks go to the Dean of the Faculty of Teacher Training and Education. In this occasion, represented by Associate Professor Lutfi Firdaus, Vice Dean for Academic Affairs, for fully supporting the conference. I also would like to thank our young lecturers and students that's become committee members who makes this event possible. Without you, this event may not be as it is today. God bless you all. I hope as Associate Professor Lutfi Firdaus could officially open the conference in a few minutes. Okay. Participants, please participate actively and enjoy the conference. Thank you very much. Wassalam.
Waalaikumsalam.
Our next agenda is official opening of the first international conference on the teaching of English and Literature 2020 by Mr. Dr. M. Lutfi Firdaus MT as the Vice Dean of Academic Affairs, Faculty of Teaching, Training and Education, University of Bengkulu. For Mr. Lutfi, time is yours.
Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Greetings and welcome to the keynote speakers, Prof. Adelina Binti Asmawi from University of Malaya and Professor G. Firdaus Adnan from University of New England. My warm regards also goes to all presenters and audience. The English Education Postgraduate Program, University of Bengkulu, led by Professor Safnil, is actively engaged with academic activities, including international seminar, such as the first ICOTEL that we have today, chaired by Professor Aswandi. So I hope through this event, everyone can share their recent research results, findings on the topic of English language teaching. Without further ado, by saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I officially open the first ICOTEL. Talk, talk, talk. Okay, everyone, enjoy the meeting and have a nice day. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Our last agenda is praying. Let's pray based on our religion and belief. Ladies and gentlemen, That's all our agenda in the opening of the first International Conference on the Teaching of English and Literature 2020, held by the English Education Postgraduate Program University of Bengkulu and Karino Sef Muda Indonesia Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move to our main agenda, let's hear one of Indonesian national song, Tanah Airku.
Tanah airku tidak kulupakan, kan terkenang selama hidupku. Biarpun saya pergi jauh, tidakkan hilang dari kalbu. Tanahku yang ku cintai, engkau ku hargai. Walaupun banyak negeri ku jalani, yang masyhur permai di kata orang, tetapi kampung dan rumahku, di sanalah ku rasa senang. Tanahku tak kulupakan, engkau ku Tanah airku tidak kulupakan, kan terkenang selama hidupku. Biarpun saya pergi jauh, tidakkan hilang dari kalbu. Tanahku yang ku cintai, engkau ku hargai.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me announce you some rules during this seminar. First, please mute your microphone during the event, except for the one who want to ask. Second, Don't forget to submit your attendance at the beginning and at the end of the event. The link attendance will be given twice in chat room. Third, link for materials will be given in chat room. Fourth, certificate will be given one day after this event. Now we move to our main agenda, the first international conference on the teaching of English and literature 2020. In this seminar, we have three keynote speakers. Associate Professor Dr. Adelia Binti Asmawi from University of Malaya, Malaysia. Associate Professor Dr. Zifirdus Adnan from University of New England, Australia. And Professor Safnil MA PhD from University of Bengkulu, Indonesia. This seminar will be led by our moderator, Mrs. Dr. Ira Maisarah MPD. For Mrs. Ira, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Puspita. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. Rabbi israh li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Okay, thank you, Puspita, for this chance, and it is very happy for me to guide in this session, especially for the first conference that is held by postgraduate program of English educations. Okay, the Honorable, the Vice Dean of Faculty of Teacher Trainings and Educations, Bengkulu University. In this occasions, it is Mr. Associate Professor Lutfi Firdaus, and also the Honorable, the Head of Postgraduate Program, the Professor Safnil, and the Honorable, all of the lecturers of Postgraduate Program, and also the participants, and special greetings and welcome for the keynote speakers. The first, Prof. Dr. Adeline Binti Asmawi, and the second one, Prof. Dr. Zifridaus Adnan, and also special welcome also for Professor Safnil MA PhD. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in this session, we will have three sessions for speakers today. The first one will begin by Professor Dr. Adeline Binti Asmawi, and then we continue with the second speaker, Professor Dr. Firdaus Adnan. And for the last speaker will be Professor Safnil MA PhD. Okay, we will start for the first session. We begin with very beauty lady, yeah, from Malaysia. Welcome, Prof. And it is very happy to see you in this room, even only in Zoom meeting. And thank you for joining us. Before we begin, I would like to read some curriculum vitae of the Professor Adeline. She is a very great person. She is Associate Professor, Department of Language and Literacy Education, Faculty of Educations, University of Malaya. And she has a lot of leadership management experience. Associate Professor Adeline is currently head of Department of Language and Literacy of Educations, and also as Deputy Dean as the experience, and also oversaw local, international, and graduate students matters as the quality managers. She also has done many research. Actually, this research is about in the areas of higher education, instructional technology, creative thinking, TESOLs, and professional development. And also she has a lot of many publications, and has published in some journals. Maybe the participants also can download his writings. And also she has a lot of awards. The latest one in 2020, platinum medal. Is it right, Prof? Yes, it is very great. Platinum medal on the help bell from Inside 2020 for recipient. And then there are some other scholarly engagement. And then there are some professionals. Actually, there are many, many great experience. It is better for us to let Prof. Adeline to introduce herself, and then maybe we can ask many things, because it is a very special time for us to be with her today. Okay, for Prof. Adeline, time is yours, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Can everybody hear me? Is the sound
Yes.
clear? All right. First of all, thank you very much to the management of the faculty for supporting this conference, to the organizers for having me to this first international conference on the teaching of English and literature, distinguished speakers, lecturers, participants, bapak-bapak, ibu-ibu, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thanks for inviting me and having me here this morning. It's blessed, blessed morning. The fact that this is the first international conference you're having on the teaching of English and literature during the pandemic, I have to congratulate you. Meaning, even when we are stuck at home, we have to face a lot of difficulties. Sometimes positive things come out of it as well. And one of it will be this first international conference on the teaching of English and literature. Congratulations, Alhamdulillah. Thank you to Bengkulu University. I love the song. I love the video you shared. I've not been there to Sumatra. I've been to Jakarta, Bali, Lombok, but not been there. So I think it's a beautiful, beautiful country. But before I begin, I'd like to share something about University of Malaya. You can read about me online, Google, you can read my CV, so it's fine, you can do that on another day. But I would like to share a little bit about University of Malaya for those who don't know University of Malaya, yeah? Okay, let me share with you short video if I can. Okay, right. Cannot find it at this point. Okay. Can you see what I'm sharing?
Yes.
That's UN. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Hang on.
The reputation basically is like everybody's.
Stop. All right. Can you see the slides now?
Yes.
Okay. So today, because of the situation we are all in, so I thought, and I know that most of you are postgraduates and also people interested in research. And because of that, I thought the best, and also this is to do with creativity and innovation, I was told. So I thought the best area to cover for today within the short time given is to touch on creative research in language education, the art of creative research in education. Language education. That's my email address. Feel free to email me anytime. Okay. So the talk, basically the outline would cover all these 6 points, what it means to be creative and innovative, creativity in language education, the new world from the disruption to recovery, what we're going through right now, creative research, what are the current challenges, what are some of the way forward. You know,
Kalau pergantian slide yo. 3 jari kancekku yo.
I can hear someone. Shall I proceed? Is that all right? Okay. So this is a book I edited. I have about 4 chapters in this book. It's called The Art of Creative Research, and I'd like to share that there's no uniform perception of creative research. If you ask me, if you ask me what is the meaning of research or creativity, I will say that there is no uniform perception of creative research. In this particular book, there are about 9 chapters covering early childhood, primary level, secondary school level, higher education, and the research on these areas, the levels of education. So it can go from using drawing to collect data. I don't know whether you've heard of that, using drawing to collect data, or script writing, collecting students' ability to script write, performance on stage, what else? Brainstorming techniques. So it can cover a lot of things actually. So there's no uniform perception. If you ask me, there's none, but we will be talking about what it means to be creative more in language education afterwards. Okay. Okay. So this is like OECD is this international body, you know that, OECD. And when they look at students' creativity at this point, they're looking at progression to charter how students are creative. They're looking at formative assessments at this point. So I don't know whether Indonesians, teachers and students or postgraduates are actually looking into formative assessments in schools, meaning not the end of a year exam, but more formative assessments. I don't know whether we're looking enough into that, because OECD looks at the development of student creativity in school from looking at formative assessments. So that's how we can actually look at the path of development of creativity amongst the students, looking at formative assessment, the type of assessments we provide to the students formatively. Formative means continuous, continuous throughout the year and not at the end of this. So we have different tasks and different activities throughout the year. So that is what is now currently being done at the moment internationally. So we know the meaning of creativity. That's not new. We know. I mean, like a lot of people say, this is creativity. That's creativity. Basically, we understand that, and that's not new. And we say, why do we have to have a creative disposition? Why do we need to have a creative disposition? Because we know research has said that it increases motivation, self-esteem of learners, prepare them for flexible needs for the future, develop risk-taking, allow them to deal with ambiguities. They can discover patterns and the use of analogy and metaphors. They say creativity allows all this to happen. And they say the arts are more creative, allow more creativity development compared to the sciences. That's why most program in sciences currently, when you look at the curriculum, the current program structure for sciences would allow for arts electives. They would allow for some arts electives so that they can have more development of those skills that I mentioned just now. And when we talk about dealing with ambiguities, okay, I'll go down there. Yeah, creativity helps students cope with novel and unpredictable experiences. What we are facing right now in the world is pretty much unpredictable, very much unpredictable. We've not had this like I can't remember, we were not born yet, I think, with the most unpredictable experience, such as right now with the corona and the COVID pandemic happening. And if we were educated to deal with unpredictable experiences, we can cope well at this point. So that is, I think, a path that we should all take. A research, a creative one on dealing with this at this point to do with language education. And that is precisely what I wanted to actually highlight. The key point, the main idea of my keynote today, right? And when we talk about discovering patterns as well, you can study patterns as in analyzing data analytics, which is very, very popular, not just popular, but very much necessary during this point of time. To discover patterns, to study patterns, to study what is going on at this point, particularly to do with the language education and literature education. It's not easy at this point. So I'll tell you why, and I'll share with you why. So we know that creativity in language education is basically, to just sum it up, is just to deal with open-endedness, less of boundaries, more open-endedness. So creativity has been linked to levels of attainment in second language learning. We know this. This is what research has told us. We can read up about this a lot. And it is to do with contemporary language teaching methods. And the key ideas are where we foster creative connections. They make connections. It's communicative. They can function with that creative development. And it's also situational, where they can use it in any situation. That's the skill. And it's not new. We have student-centeredness. This is not new, where you have a learning classroom focused on student-centeredness, or something which is interaction-based, more experiential, pengalaman, and exploratory. So these have been drummed into our heads all this while about creativity in language education. The use of multimodality, this is quite new, quite recent. Before the pandemic, everybody was doing this anyway. So multimodality, you don't use one method, you have many different methods: pictures, images, videos, sound, animation, right? And you use various genres, various text types to deal with the current generation. They're not generation Y, the generation what? What are they? They are the latest one, Generation Z, Generation Alpha. So we've got newer generations needing different types of approaches. That's why we use a lot of multimodality, role play, simulation, and the list goes on and on and on and on. We know this. It's all about, like I said, I sum it up, it's about open-endedness. Having open-endedness allows you to actually develop a language. And that's pretty much creativity in language education. Okay, so for example, let's simulate. Okay, for example, this one is just a question that you can also answer, and maybe chat or answer, unmute and answer. You are prepared with a lesson to teach Shakespeare's sonnets to a synchronous class of 35 students. And suddenly you were told that 10 of them cannot be part of the lesson because they don't have the electronic devices to do so. And this the only way is through their parents' phone in the weekend. And you're teaching on a Tuesday and you're ready for the 35, and then you found out that 10 cannot join you at this point. What do you do? Would anybody like to just try answering if you want? What would you do? So this is currently what's happening. What would you do? Anyone?
Okay, maybe the participant would like to give response for this case.
No one wants to. No one wants to.
Maybe they are shy to speak.
Just imagine you're prepared to teach This is currently what's happening. You're doing a synchronous class, meaning an online face-to-face class. Like now we're having a synchronous session with 35, and then 10 of them cannot be part of this. They don't have the electronic devices. And I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to see that there are about 300 participants, meaning you are all equipped with the tools, but not all are equipped out there. Students particularly, not all are equipped. You know, there's this inequities around the world, not just in Malaysia or Indonesia, around the world. There are people not having access to education at this point of time. And first you would think, what would I do? What would I do? You would think that. And then you would think, what would my friends do? What would my colleagues do? What do others do in maybe Jakarta? What would others do maybe in Aceh? What would others do in Kuala Lumpur? That is where you broaden your mind and you start researching, reading and all that. So that would be what I would encourage people to do at this point as educators to be, or educators, where having the knowledge in itself is not enough anymore. Having the knowledge itself, but you need to also study the patterns and what people are doing to cope, basically to cope, because you don't know what's happening. And that is actually developing your creativity, your imagination. That's what Einstein said anyway. So that is currently my concern at this point for Malaysia. And I think you would have the same issue because we're neighbors. We have the same issues. I think you would have the same issues. We have this, we're very similar in many ways. You know, the divide is big. And look at this. This is global education. This is by UNESCO. And you can look at the statistics. Yeah, you can look at the statistics. And this has been happening from before February, globally. So we see closures of school impacting hundreds and millions of students. Number of learners impacted. And I know in Indonesia as well, you guys are also affected. And this is global. And when schools are closed, okay, so this is figures where learners are enrolled at pre-primary, primary, lower secondary, and upper secondary schools of education, as well as tertiary education levels. At this point, University Malaya is functioning online. We don't meet our students. I don't know about Bengkulu University. Is that what you're doing? Are we also doing online lessons, classes? Yeah. So you're all going online as well. Similar. So we started having the lockdown in March. It was lifted in July. So we had 3 months of MCO, and then from July to October we had freedom, and 2 weeks ago we just had another one, a CMCO, a conditional one, but it's still MCO. So it's coming back. The numbers rising. So I'm not sure about Indonesia, but I know that cases are pretty much not very okay for the whole wide world, and I think this is going to stay. The thing is, it's going to stay. It's not going to go away. So it's going to stay for at least 1, 2, 3 years. This condition where we're in, the situation, yeah, and it is very much unpredictable. We did not know this, and it is happening. So this is actually the best time to actually explore in our research in terms of language education. All right, so we know that you can go to this link and see, and this particular chart here, this graph, actually moves. It's actually interactive. If you go online, and you will see it growing and moving. So it's quite fun to have a look at this by Statistica. So one of the concerns is, how do we ensure continuity of education? What more language education? How do we ensure this? How do we make sure that people continue with education? The number of dropouts are higher now in the United States. Like, people drop out of school. So in Malaysia, we don't have that much. US have always had this issue with dropouts. Now the number of dropouts are actually increasing. So they are facing that in the other side of the world because of this pandemic. So meaning that the issue of education is affected because of the situation we're in. So that is something that we need to think about, start thinking about, not just in Bengkulu or just Kuala Lumpur. What can, how can, and the best thing out of it is, just like your conference, the first conference, it's online and we don't have to move. We can still get data, but how? So it's also a blessing in disguise, where you can actually connect with people from everywhere if you know how socially to interact with them online, and gather data from everywhere to do with your own research. So I think that's particularly awesome. You have to also try to think about the positive of everything, the hikmah in everything. So I think that's one of it we can work on. Okay, so what are some of the challenges that in language education? There are so many. We talk about personalization, inclusion, intelligence, and we talk about digital divide, how some have an iPad, laptop, phone, whatever they need, screens, but on the other side, people cannot even eat, no food to just survive. Physiological needs are even not even met. So we have that in Malaysia, and I know you have that in Indonesia as well. The divide is quite large. Okay, bad or lack of network access, no electronic devices. Even if you have the devices, you don't have the skills. The students don't know how to deal with education online, even learning language. And sometimes you have the tools, you have the teacher, you know the skills, but the environment is just horrible. The environment, for example, I've worked with rural, the poor children, yeah, urban poor children. So they have a phone. They have us over here trying to help them. They have the skills, they have the motivation, but having 7 siblings in the very small apartment, very small area, to study and to learn, the noise was just unbearable. You have the sisters and brothers moving about, and that is real. That is online learning at this point. And if you have 7 siblings, how can the parents afford to provide electronic device for each and everyone going to school? How can you afford it? And they have different lessons. Those who in the end they share or they take turns. And this is happening in the city of Kuala Lumpur among the urban poor. The urban poor folks, they are going through this. So not having a conducive environment is also an issue. And I think it's worth studying, it's worth researching and trying to solve, or at least give some ideas or suggestions on how to cope with this, And we have also, other than the digital divide, the second one is the teacher readiness. They're not ready. If the teachers, this is in research, yeah, if the teachers went for professional development courses on ICT, like last year or the year before, they were always in professional development courses to do with ICT, they're pretty much ready. They at least know what to do. Okay, but if they've not been trained technically to deal with computer technology and to deal with teaching and learning of language online like this, they would have issues, a lot of issues. Materials to share, to gather, to discuss with friends, in terms of creativity, to be creative at this point is a must for the teachers. So they're accelerated. There is accelerated movement of accepting what's new. All right, and how do you integrate what you've gathered and taught, and then come back with the feedback, and then continuously assess all the students. How do you do that? And we also have issues with parental support, because most students are at home, and when they're at home, the teachers cannot keep track of the child. Some of them wake up late, some of them are not in class, some of them get online, switch off their video, and then they pretend to be online and they're not. So we have a lot of issues. We also have issues with assessment. How do you assess a student? How do we know that they're actually doing the assessment themselves? Or how do we assess language when we cannot see them? And how do we ensure that it's reliable, whatever that you're assessing? So these are also issues that worth visiting at this point of time. So I'll go back to parental support, scheduling. They need to observe, check, and assist. In terms of time schedule, if you have 3 kids, 4, how do you divide your time? So parents are going crazy as well, juggling work, sometimes chores, working at home, plus taking care of so it's a lot of areas that needs to be discovered, like rediscovery of how we do things. So when they mention new norm, we are actually having new norm in terms of research as well in language education. And number 4, I leave it as what else, meaning open-endedness, meaning you can actually decide what the issues are, what the challenges are. So what I've mentioned are all that I've read from across the nation and across the globe, Asia, worldwide, the issues that people face in terms of educating, language educating. So you can add your own where this is happening in Bengkulu itself. What else? Describe, localize it, make it your own. So apparently the West they are actually very fast in producing research at this point. Pandemic related research to do with language education. The West, they're doing very fast. The Chinese, very fast. So we need to also move fast and to localize this. So if you read current research, they're more from other countries, other backgrounds, like I said, dropouts. We don't have similar issues. Asians, we may share similar issues. Indonesia, Malaysia, we may share. Brunei, Singapore, we may share similar issues. So we need to quickly jump into that boat of moving forward and fast to capture that, so that you can actually there's this area to discover at this point. And I think it's a positive way of looking at what we can do in terms of creativity, in terms of research. And I'm telling you, data collection will be new. The way you collect your data will be new. You don't have to travel. And I myself, currently, we're supposed to collect data from across Malaysia, and we cannot move around. The borders are closed. So we have to deal with how do we collect your data? How do we ensure validity, reliability of the data? How do you record or interview the voice? So we're dealing with all sorts, and those are worthy of papers to be published, actually. And you know that if you publish the papers, you increase the name of your university as well. Yeah, you will actually improve your university's name out there internationally. So how do we publish? There are many, many ways at this point, so that I'm looking at opportunities, and I'd like to just encourage people to do this. If you have postgraduates, like I have 5 postgraduates, for example, PhD students, and if each is working on something, and we are working together, you can get 5 papers published already in this year, and you choose which area you want to go, and that is part of being creative as well. So I'll move on to the next slide. Okay. So you see here, this is the inflection point. This is the inflection point for rapid innovation. It's hasty, it's very fast, but we are all in it already. You being here, we're already accelerating. We are already accelerating. Whether you like it or not, we are actually accommodating. We are adapting. We are pretty much a flexible being, that Allah creates. Like, we are very flexible in terms of evolving and quickly. It's just that who does this faster? Who grabs onto the opportunities faster? So I'm encouraging you to move faster for that. And then it's not easy, I know. All right. So it's hasty, but it is a necessity. And your data, if shared, will help more people. Okay. For example, this particular child I was talking about, where he has 7 siblings, and it's just the environment. There's no conducive environment to study, and you're struggling to teach. And the teacher is struggling because you cannot hear what's going on, and it's so disruptive, noisy, crying and all that. How do you deal with it? And we've also had issues where students have to climb up trees or go outside of the house, climb up some hills to get access to in certain areas of over there. So we've had issues like that. And imagine a university student sitting for an online exam up on a tree writing, So that is real. And who has actually studied this? Who has actually gone to study the struggles of online assessment on a tree during the pandemic? I don't think anybody has yet. And it's worthy to be visited, I think. And quickly, there's so many things that you can do now. So just quickly, after this, to just try thinking about something that is like that, and then And it's not just enough to do the research. You have to share your finding. That's why you write. You need to share what you find. And if you do it for Asia, then we can actually develop together. So that's the importance of having findings shared. That's the importance of having it published, written and published, not just to finish your master's or PhD, but also to make sure that this is shared. Data is worth sharing now. People are doing that. Okay. All right. Like I said, I don't have one definition of creativity because it's contingent. It's dependent on where you are, what you're doing. So there's no one final definition of creativity because it is contingent. Basically, if you look at it, it can be the ability to generate new ideas, new processes. You can do that currently. If you come up with new processes of doing things, that's already generating a new ideas. That's already creative research. Process products, and you re-examine existing issues. Previously, nobody has ever looked at the pandemic related issues, but now we re-examine issues. For example, you have always looked at the use of abbreviation, short form in language on social media. For example, people don't write in long sentences anymore. They use short form, all pendek, right? So before the pandemic, they were doing that. But did you know that after the pandemic, that got worse? Things are even shorter than short now. So in terms of language education, you can learn and study that. Shorter than short. Then there are more pictures, videos, and less reading. It's even, the reading is even as such less and less in terms of text, in terms of normal, ordinary book readings. But if you look at what has increased would be video, multimodality, TikToks. How would we use TikToks for learning, teaching English? We can. So these are re-examining and re-articulating of existing issues. So we had the issues, and it's getting worse or getting better or different because of the pandemic. And the moment you re-examine and re-articulate these things, they become more novel. Okay, so it is what I said. An ordinary step may result in an extraordinary footprint with multiplier effects. So if you found something, you share, it can be extended to other countries and have these multiplier effects. So it can be ordinary, it can be really ordinary. It doesn't have to be like, whoa, something like out of this world. No, in language education, it can be an ordinary step leading to an extraordinary footprint. And you have to remember that. Okay, if you say creativity is only this, no, creativity is contingent. It changes with the situation and what you need to do. Okay, so one thing that I know in that particular book I showed you, that art of creative research that I wrote in there, and you have to be supported by a specific working environment, working situation. So your working environment needs to encourage space, freedom, communication. If you are in a working environment that doesn't allow you freedom, everything has to be bounded by something. No, only this, only this, only this. And I refer to bosses, managers, bosses, leaders. If you want lecturers or anybody, your subordinates, to be more creative, you need to provide the space, you need to provide the freedom and communication. So teachers, if you want your students to be creative, you cannot put boundaries. You have to have some, but you need to give them some space for freedom and communication. And creative research is also about everyday occurrences. And now our everyday occurrence is pandemic related. Definitely, that is our everyday occurrence with a mask on. Do you know that this affects language use and communication when you're outside? This mask affects language use. We used to rely also on gestures and body and movements and body gestures and all that, expressions. With this, you can also study something now on this, on the use of how do you do that? Lack of facial expression affecting what? Study that. So we also look at collaborative enterprise. I'm looking at Bengkulu Uni and University of Malaya collaborating on something. we're looking at that, or people from the US, from the Australia, you already have professor there to collaborate, and this is doable. No money needs to be spent on flights, okay? And it's not quick. There's no easy or quick solution. It's incremental. It goes a bit and a bit. So if you're doing master's or PhD, don't expect the world to come onto your lap. You just know that it's incremental. Your study combined with another study and another study and another study will actually be incremental towards progress. The key is to work on it, even if it's as small as that. You just have to work on it. Okay. And we need a positive, localized, creative, and new research culture. Localized research culture. I don't want to be reading only American research. Do you? I want to read about Indonesia as well, Malaysia, Asia, Thailand, what's happening. And this new research culture is to fit the new norm of the new world now. Whether or not you want it, it's already there. It's just about gathering what you want to do in terms of researching. Okay. And if you perpetuate the myth, if you think that genius creativity, this myth of genius, only geniuses can be creative, that is a setback. You know where you know the Newton Newton had that apple incident, the Newtonian incident, where he had that apple, and then what theory came out of it? Do we know? Do we know the apple that struck his head and then he came up with, what theory was that? The Newtonian apple, that incident. What theory was that? Anybody? Apple, Newton, apple. What theory was that? I'm sure you know this. You remember
Gratification.
Theory of what?
Gratification.
Yeah, gravity, right? Theory of gravity. So Newton sat on a tree and the apple hit him. It's called the Newtonian incident. It's very popular. The theory of the gravity. He talks about gravity, I think. So if you think being creative means to have this myth of a genius, creativity, that is a setback in research, because that's not what it is. It's about everyday occurrences. Creative research is about everyday occurrences where you grab a hold of something which is like current and you try to add knowledge to it and you see it from a different view. And that is creative. Like I said just now, yeah, collaborative, incremental, localized. It's new. So don't think of creative research in a way that you would relate to Newton or Einstein or who else? Edison. You don't think that way. If you do, that's a setback already. You're already boundary. You're creating a boundary already. So we don't do that. Okay. So we need to highlight new aspects of research ideas and culture so that new researchers. So I have tried to highlight new aspects of research ideas and culture. Okay, so that newer researchers can work creatively and also build resilience around their creativity. For them to build resilience, they need to have a good working condition for encouragement of space, freedom, and communication. And that's where they have that space. So we need to actually help new researchers as well. And this goes from management to lecturers to student teachers to their own learners in school. So it goes that way. So we need to actually be careful of that, okay? Or else it's going to be bounded, okay? And blocked by certain things. Okay. And look at this. If you don't believe me, these are major events that have affected language use in history. Okay, the world wars have actually affected language use. Natural disasters have actually affected language use. So this is in history, it's recorded in research. Try reading up how World War has actually affected language use. You will see natural disasters as well. So in 2020, we have a major event. We have accepted this. So it's pandemic driven. So we know this pandemic has affected language use and is continuously doing this at this point. We are continuously being affected by this major event, pandemic driven. Okay, so we can see previously that was what happened. So now we see that this is happening. So I'd like to share with you a study by the Americans, and they're making individuals, they're asking individuals to document changes in their lives, in their social life. So they would send out Google links and ask, would you like to be part of this? And they will give gifts. They will give gifts to those participants. And would you like to document changes in your social life and language use? And not just document in terms of writing, they would ask those participants to record themselves, audio, and then upload. So this particular researcher would get audio recordings from across the states, United States, and they would share about life experiences. And so the researcher would actually tell them what he needs, and then they would record audio. All right. So they set up a link where people have agreed, and not just one time, because it's longitudinal. Longitudinal means longer, for a longer period of time. Say they would send another link periodically about your experience at that point of time, and then after a couple of months they would have sent another link. So this is currently being done, and they were one of the first, I think, probably Minnesota. I think you can check. Okay. And they also ask questions concerning language and how people communicate. For example, when you're wearing a mask, have you noticed that you use your eyes and your hands to express things? So now you can't use you bodies, like now when I'm looking at you, I can use my hands, I can use my face, but not other parts of the body. You can't see me anymore. But outside, people can see you. You can use your hand, but this is like that. So how has that changed language use for communication? And when you have that, even if you go to school and you have the SOP that you have to follow, you covered. Students are covered. So how does that change language education when you're teaching speaking and you're teaching, you want to look at facial expressions? How do you look at, because we look at a person holistically, and when that's covered, how? So that's one area. Okay. Eyes and hands expressing more, they say. So eyes and hands, a lot of people, when they start using a mask, like a niqab, they start using eyeliners, and that's funny. They start, decorating and all that, because they only have eyes to show now, your difference. And you see, you cannot smile. Even if you smile, nobody knows. So I've tried smiling and people just don't care because they don't see you. Okay. And do you say COVID or coronavirus? Or do you call it something else to different people? Why don't you call it COVID to everybody? Why do you have only specific words used to refer to COVID? Some people, they don't want to, for example, you say the COVID generation. People get upset. Don't call us COVID generation. The generation who was born in this generation and locked in and cannot go out, they're called the COVID. No, you call us the Corona generation. So Corona means crown as in royalty. COVID doesn't mean crown. So there are things that you can, because they have the word has meaning. It comes with meaning, and meaning makes it cultural. Cultural makes it, like people get very affected and by the use of the word COVID, pandemic. They say the Corona generation, the Corona. It sounds better, they say. So that is language use as well. So different people would have different issues. I don't know what the issues are in Bengkulu, how things are. I know your university is beautiful. I saw how green it was, but I don't know the real issues that you are facing as a society, as a community. I don't know. So it's your job to study and share the findings with fellow Asian colleagues as well, like us, so that we can share. And I hope this continues, such a discourse interaction. I hope this continues. And this is an example of the one, Michigan, not Minnesota, Michigan, you see? So they wanted 5th and 10th graders. This is a different one. This is a diary project. My COVID diary project. So people will write a diary and submit their recording. And this is a diary one. Okay, so you can scan the QR code, and this is how they get participants. This is just one example of how cute. And this is for younger ones. Yeah, they need some information about younger ones learning a language during the pandemic. So Michigan State did this. So you can look at how they do it, but you localize it for your own area. So that is what we can do now. Okay, this is pretty cool. Okay, we're almost done.
We still
Almost done.
have 2 minutes more.
Only 2
And
minutes. Okay.
yeah, and there are so many questions for
Oh, okay.
each other.
Like finish up, yeah. So these are some of the areas you can go on studying. All right. These are, so we have specific English teaching. Those successful in school can survive. They say, can survive 3 months of online learning and bounce back in school. Those who have not been successful in school, when they go off online, they have issues. This is the issues. We have social emotional health of students and teachers. Pictures, more pictures used. I've talked about this. You can read there. Yeah, interactivity, lack of corrective feedback from teacher, cannot give feedback enough to the students. Lack of practice times, isolation, managing students there, learning management systems, limited social activities, learner attitude, teachers sudden saddle responsibility. Teachers are suddenly overloaded, working creatively online. The corona generation not having done a lot on outside. So when you give them examples, imagine you're in a, they cannot imagine because they're not outdoor. So you have to change the way you teach because they've not been outside. So they don't know many of the things we include in our textbooks. They don't know them. So these are real issues that you can actually study. Okay. So these slides have been given to the organizer. You can have it. Okay, this is my last slide. So within this will be a great deal of creativity, vibrancy, and even poetry. So let's look positively at this and how you can actually study about this. Okay, it's not about technology. I said that. It's about pedagogy and ownership. Okay, done. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you,
Okay,
Prof.
okay.
And there are so many questions for you in chat room.
Okay.
The first one is from Miss Maria. What is the parental support importance in education and how to encourage parents to support? And some questions is quite the same, how to be a creative teachers and also researchers. And in these pandemic conditions, what is the challenges and the strategies to research ethics from Risang Baskara Sanata Dharma University? So maybe you can give.
All right, the first one. Why is parental support important? Why is parental support important in education? How to encourage parents to support? Why it's important? Why parental support is important? You know, the students are now at home and not in school, so you know why parents have to keep an eye out for the students at home because the teachers cannot keep an eye out for the students they're not at school. So that's one of the reasons why it's also to also look at you know, more students at this point are having mental health issues because they are actually isolated from their friends. So we have issues of like depression, mental health. So who can actually keep an eye out for such students? Parents are actually the first person to see those students. You need to be alert in terms of their studying, that they're following the lessons online, and that the child is stable, because with the pandemic comes a lot of mental health issues. So you need to read up on this and probably study that also. Okay. How do we encourage? That is one of the things that we can actually come up with, a module to help parents to support education, online education, a module. Why do in Indonesia it will be different? So how can a parent support students? Probably we come up with an idea like that. Do research and come up with what Ria's question. Okay. Ideas from our mind. So difficult. We come out from our mind. Please give us advice, suggestion to become creative teacher in future. Read. Read. You read, you get ideas. So you have to read. You have to read globally. You have to see what people are doing. Like I read what's being done in Michigan. So you need to read. Okay. That's the easiest way to say it. Okay. That's Fitra. Tori and Putra. Good signals. They can't take online lessons. Wait a minute. Not many. Similar in Kuala Lumpur as well. Okay. Whether the professor has a good very well so the students don't fall behind. Okay. Let me share with you. As a country, You know, China had the pandemic earlier than all of us. So they immediately, the leaders of the country actually put a lot of budgeting into supporting education. It's not just you, it's also your government has to also think about this. So I think my government has to also think about this. And my government is actually presenting our budget for 2021 soon. We don't know yet. But China did this. They come up with a lot sum of money to support national cloud platform. This is in China. National cloud platform, promoting digital, offering digital learning resources for free. And they created what, 7,000 servers, yeah, in China alone. 1990 terabyte bandwidth, accommodating 50 million learners. And you know their population is really high. So to support 50 million learners, those who cannot, the government prepares free textbooks, free delivery to the students. Parents can also come and collect so that they can also study from home for those who do not have access. So this is done by China. What can Indonesia do? So you cannot like do the same thing. Sometimes you have to look at your economic as well, economic situation. We cannot just follow what US is doing or whatever. We need to localize what we do. And how can we do this? So you need to quickly, your scholars need to quickly discuss and have these issues mooted, sent to the government to decide on some such things. You have to do it. So if we're going to do it, you have to do it as well. So we have Academy Professor Malaysia, Academy Science Negara. We have our group of people on all the time thinking, doing, and suggesting to the government. And you guys need to do this. And usually they are academics, professors, researchers. They're you. You can do this. You have to do this. All right. So there's no one size fits all for this. Okay. Wait, who else is this? Risang.
Yeah, Risang Baskara.
Okay. What are the challenges to research ethics? Okay. Ethics goes the same. They're the same. You have to get consent. You need to record well. You need to, trustworthiness of research. You have to confirmability, dependability, transferability. Follow the actual meaning of trustworthiness of research. Adapt it to meet pandemic situation. Meaning, if I'm collecting data from another place online, I still need to have consent. I still need to report without being biased. That is ethics. I need to have permission from the school, the Department of Education. You follow the same ethics requirements, but they tweak because yours is online. You just have to tweak. And their faces, if you're recording voices, no name. It's the same thing. Anonymity is the same thing. Okay? All right. Okay, Ahmad Nasir. Do I have to answer all the questions? Okay, 2 more only. How about teaching the special purposes? Special purpose, similar. Yes, abbreviation, TKS, that's right. Sometimes they don't even write, they just put emojis. Now you have emojis, you have stickers, you have copying of Beyonce's face, a copying of whatever artist's face, giving expressions. You don't need to say anything. You copy, use emoji, stickers. That is worth studying. That is like everywhere right now, stickers, yeah? Okay. Okay, I need to say that teachers should give space to the students to be creative. The problem is when we give space to them, they do not do anything. They still need guidance. How do we solve this problem? Yes, give them steps, guidance. You need to tell them what to do, how to do it, and let them. You can't just say, go, be creative. Cannot. You got to give them ideas. Like I gave you ideas from Michigan. I gave you topics that you can explore. I asked you, go read up. You need to tell them to do something so that they can go and create. You have to guide them. You never let them go off free. You have to always have guidelines. Some guidelines with certain open-endedness, right? So that's, I think, correct. Very good. Let's see. Yes, synchronous, asynchronous. Not all of us, to that question, they see, where I said that the student can only have access to the mobile phone in the weekends. Yes, if you record everything or you have it asynchronously, they can actually come back and actually do it on another day. And that is big now. You cannot have it synchronous all the time. Limited network. I hope I've answered everybody's question. I hope I've been helpful as a keynote to this prestigious first conference by Bengkulu University faculty. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Prof. It is very great.
Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, thank you so much, Prof. It is very great topic. Yeah, even pandemic gave us a negative effect, but actually it forced us to be creative and also to be innovative in teaching and also research. But seems that it is easy to be said, but difficult to be done in the reality. So this is I think the case in many aspect of the life. Okay, thank you, Prof, for the topic for us today. It is very happy to see you. And then we continue to the first presenter, the second, the second keynote speakers, Prof. Dr. Z. Firdaus. Are you here? Prof? Enggak, udah ada.
Ya, ada.
Ada. Oke. Thank you, Prof.
Nggak bisa lihat saya?
Bisa. Udah kelihatan. Kita tadi Prof izin sholat ya?
Ya, karena udah lewat jam 2.
Oh, beda waktu.
4 jam.
4 jam, Prof. Okay. Thank you, Prof. Before we begin, I would like to read the curriculum vitae of Prof. Z. Firdaus Adnan, PhD. He is membership of professional organizations in Applied Linguistic Associations of Australia. Now he lives in Australia also. And there are some professional organizations that he has followed till now. And also there are some book chapters that have been written by Prof. Z, such as Prospects of Indonesian Research Articles, and there are some more, and also there are some selected articles in research journals. Maybe because we have limited time, so I cannot read more, and it is better for Prof. Z to introduce himself to us. And also there are some awards that he got from professional services as the co-editors in the Australian Review of Applied Linguistics. And also in this occasions, we would like to invite directly to Prof. Z to present the topic for today for English language teachings, and maybe share the experiences how teaching English in Australia. Thank you. Time is yours.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Peace be upon everyone. Let me continue a bit of my personal introductions. I came from Padang. I learned English in Padang. So I had a bit of experience there. And in I used to teach at high school in Padang, and then at a refugee camp in Galang, on Galang Island in Riau. And then after I finished my S1, the first undergraduate degree, I had a chance to go to Australia to study initially, but then got carried away. And alhamdulillah, my aspiration was achieved. That is by studying at the highest level, that is to gain my PhD. So I started at Griffith University, and then moved to Melbourne University for my master's, and then Curtin University in Perth for my PhD. And I have also taught at several institutions, including at Melbourne University, Murdoch University, and now at University of New England in New South Wales, Australia. But in Indonesia, in Padang, I used to teach English, and so at the refugee camp. But in Australia, I've been teaching Indonesian language and culture, and plus language education, of course, and Indonesian culture as well, because I'm responsible for Indonesian studies discipline here in Australia. Okay, first, but I should say greeting first. I haven't done it, sorry, because I was continuing from what Ira did. I would like to greet Mr. Deputy Dean, Chair of the Steering Committee and the members of the conference, the Chair, Mr. Azwandi, Dr. Azwandi, and then Head of the Postgraduate, Professor Safnil, the honorable presenters, Professor Safnil, Professor Adelina Binti Asmawi, and also other presenters. Sorry, those are keynote speakers, sorry. And then the honorable presenters and honorable ladies and gentlemen. The topic of my presentation today, the title, I mean, spicing up your our EFL/ESL teaching with literature materials to achieve satisfactory outcomes. So if we could, would the committee upload the PowerPoint, or do I need to do it? Okay, in that case, I might have to share the screen then myself. I haven't opened it yet. Let me open it. Can everyone see it?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I will control it from here. Right, so that's the title, spicing up. In Bahasa Indonesia, that could mean membumbui, literally, but that could also mean have a figurative meaning too. How to make our teaching interesting and engaging the student, which is a new buzzword these days. While in the past, we knew what we call it, CBSA, Cara Belajar Siswa Aktif, or in English we call it student-centered learning. But here in Australia, now we are talking about student engagement. Yeah, how the student engage in all the teaching activities that we do. Now, let me start. I don't have a particular outline, but I can say what we are going to discuss today is after the intro, I would talk about the issues that we have, but in English language teaching, particularly in Indonesia. Now, I focus on Indonesia because I was told that many of our participants are from Indonesia. However, I believe that what we talk today is applicable to other non-English speaking countries at least. Then we'll see how or what the views of experts regarding the use of literature materials in ESL, English as a second language, which is not really right in our case in Indonesia, because we have many first languages and then the national language and then English. So might be more appropriate to call it EFL, English as a foreign language. And then why and how do we use the literature materials? And then we continue with and how this one has a great potential, not only to spice up our teaching, to engage our students, but also to satisfy the approach, philosophy, and aims of language teaching or EFL teaching in Indonesian schools based on the 2013 curriculum. That's basically the outlines that we're going to go through. Let me start with the problems now. As a non-English speaking countries, we as teachers have to struggle to generate students' interest. If we don't do that, then we could be unhappy ourselves, plus the community would be unhappy too, and plus scholars. Now, research into the teaching of English in Indonesia has shown that, generally our teaching has not been successful in the sense that to create a competence communicators in English. Now, this is a serious matter, considering that we are now, we can't avoid facing globalization, where we have connectedness with other world citizens from other parts of the world, and they will be coming to our country. Now, you might have been seeing now our country is liberating many things, including business, industry, trade, and so on, which mean we have to make our people competent in communicating in English. Now, if you don't do that, then we will be mostly become consumers of other people's products. target of other people commercial marketing. So number two, because of the lack of use of English in our community generally, particularly in rural areas, most students have little or no motivation due to lack of communicative involvement. And sadly, of course, for many of them, English is a feared subject. At least I can refer to my experience until I became the grade 12. Grade 10. I couldn't understand English at all. My teacher came to the class, say, "This is Ali, this is Budi." The language was not put in context. The teaching was not meaningful. So it doesn't connect with me, and I couldn't understand much of what was taught.
Yo, suruh papa, suruh paman, suruh ayu, suruh.
And then we also have some significant differences between our students' first language and or national language, and then the outcome tend to lack communicative competence in our graduates. So now we as teachers, then, and this community, as I said before, are not happy with the outcomes. So how can we spice up the teaching? How can we engage the student? Now, remember the CBSR started in Padang in a pilot project in a Sekolah Pembangunan maybe about 40 years ago. But yet, recent research indicate that not much has developed in many of our schools. Okay, now in today's presentation, I hope to show that using literature material can not only spice up our teaching or your teaching, but also suit the 2013 National Curriculum Philosophy, as well as satisfying the methods and aims and objectives, as well as the approach of EFL teaching, including English. Therefore, the literature material can provide an excellent offer to address those teaching problems. So what is literature and literature material? I know people know this, but we just need to go through it quickly. In a basic meaning, literature means a body of written works. In dictionaries, there are two classifications of meaning. First is a body of written work. Scholars or researchers or researchers in a given field. So when you write an article or a thesis, you do a literature review. So literature in that sense is a body of research publications. The second meaning is creative and art works such as poetry and prose, written And in recent definition is has been added with oral artworks. So the presentation, in this presentation, we are going to adopt the second meaning, of course. Now, the definition in this presentation, to be specific, results, the materials are the results of the process of feeling and thinking, of an author, either about own self, society, states, and or his or her environment. We call it cultural expressions, which means literature material is part of a culture. Now, using literature materials means through literature, we also teach not only the language, but also the culture. Now, the question is, of course, which culture? Now, in the past, we looked at, English-speaking countries like the UK, US, or Australia, or New Zealand, etc. But since a few years ago, this is not the only speaking. These are not the only English-speaking countries anymore, because English has become work language. So that is marked by the emergence of world Englishish research. So there's now there is Singaporean English, there is perhaps Japanese English, etc. Now, in Indonesia, our curriculum, national curriculum, is a bit skewed to Western countries like UK, US, or New Zealand, or Australia. But in a recent article which I reviewed, there's a call to be more widespread, which could include African culture or South American culture, and so on. Why? Because our graduates, when they become adults and become professionals, they could travel to any countries in the world, particularly if they work for foreign affairs, for example, but also as business people, as professionals. So there's a call for more even culture. But as far as the curriculum is concerned, we are still biased towards the original English-speaking countries. So the materials can include drama, prose, and poetry. But in this presentation, we focus on short stories only due to limited time. Now, before we move on, let's see what experts think about the use of literature materials in EFL teaching. There are CAM, group of scholars, who are supporters of language teaching, isolated from literature, separated from literature. An example is McKay, 2001, who consider literature as one that maintain its own complicated language, which is not suitable for foreign language learners due to its distinct purpose. So she is in the opinion that literature is for introducing a culture and is directed to certain audience. But that seems to be a restricted view. The pro camps would say that, for example, Sinclair says that we must gain an insight into the use of language if we want to improve the learner's expressive ability. So the goal of foreign language study is to learn a language in order to read its literature, or in order to benefit from the mental discipline and intellectual development that results from the foreign language study. So in this case, he is more positive regarding the intellectual enlightenment among our learners. Now, my position side with the pro camp for the following reasons. Okay, first, literature can generate interest of students or interesting. Second, students are engaged and involved and can be made more so. So teachers can make the students more involved, more actively engaged in the teaching learning processes. Next one, it can develop cultural awareness and competence. I will deal with this one by one later on. And fourth, authentic materials can present language through genuine, real context. Fifth, it can develop a dignified character, which is the philosophy, the core philosophy of the 2013 Indonesian National Curriculum. And six, it is in line, teaching using literature materials is in line with the approach and methods adopted in the curriculum. But there's downside, of course. For example, many teachers are not confident due to lack of expertise in literature. So teachers who are just learn literature lightly, and in Indonesia, this is, I experienced that when I was studying English in Padang, at IKI Padang at the time, and everyone knows that people from non-arts or literature disciplined are only lightly taught literature. So they are not confident in that regard. They feel they don't know much about theory and the language or the literature. Two, they might say that not familiar with the ways to use it in teaching. And three, there's also complaint regarding difficulties in finding materials that suit the linear curriculum syllabus. So in syllabus, we usually see that there's this form, this grammar form that has to be taught, and so on. And there was also dependence on textbooks. But I would argue that this issue can be overcome quite easily, as we can see later, if we are willing to search it. Okay, you move on. Interestingness, yeah. Teacher can make it more interesting too. So teacher can choose a story which suits student age and interest. For example, we can find it here. We will show it in a minute. The teacher can also talk up the story to increase interest. For example, by telling the students the benefit of the story. You can tell students, for example, that this story is a great story from England, for example, and you can tell the synopsis. You can imagine when a presenter talk up a presentation, and then to make the students more involved and more interesting for them, you can promise a performance, for example. Now I did this when I was teaching at Murdoch University. I was using a book called Bali Adat. That's the story of Badung Kingdom in Bali. And we have two classes a week. So on one, I use two types of material. One is the theme-based material. That is from Indonesian weekly magazine, newspapers, and so on. This is to ensure the students are able to discuss social issues in Indonesia, exposed to what's happening in Indonesia, and so on. But I also use literature materials which talk more deeply about the history of a particular area, and that is Bali. Why Bali? Because many Australians go to Bali. So we use it intermittently. In 1 week, we follow on the theme-based materials. On the other week, we teach the literature material bit by bit. We cut into a smaller portion. Now, at the end of the semester, the students are so active in preparing for the presentation, because the presentation will be part of the assessment, final assessment, and we allocate quite a big mark for it. Now, let's see can people see now?
Yeah.
Right. So choosing stories, yeah, there are many stories there, and the language is not that difficult. A graduate from S1 or even S2, bachelor or master's, should be able to understand that story. And the type of the stories there, it can be for junior high school level, and there's also for senior high school levels. And yeah, so, and it has also not only the reading of the story, but also there's a long text there, which is read by a native speaker of English. Now, students can be made to be involved. So to promote what we call, I mentioned before, student engagement. Okay. How? Well, first, depending on the level of the proficiency of the students, we can start, if it is a lower level, we can start a factual questions. We'll come to taxonomy bloom later on regarding the question we can ask. student can be made responsible. In particular, for example, we tell a student to find to choose a story on the YouTube. Now, Professor Adele before talked about problem access to the internet. We could do it, we could group the students. And within the group, we can include students with access to internet. So we can teach sharing in this case. And the student can also be made responsible to report a summary of the story, for example. And student can be made independent as well as collaborative. Now, if we promise, if a short story like that, we can do it, let's say bi-weekly. You know, students in the group can find a story and can perform in the class, you know, and that's more, you know, that much more involved for them. And then as an independent, the student can do their own comments on the story. Now, again, of course, it depends on the level of proficiency or competence. And by asking higher level a question, the teachers can develop critical and deep thinking of the students.
Excuse me, Prof.
Yep.
We have 2 minutes more.
Oh my
And
God.
we have 2 questions.
Okay. Okay. Right. I'll just go quickly. Good. We can teach good lessons. We can compare, get the student to compare what happened in their own country and in the story. It could be in terms of jobs, habits, traditions, and so on. Now, how to develop good, dignified character. By reading selected story, the teachers can choose good themes that contain good lessons, and can be reinforced through question and answers. Can be exposure. Our students, after we generate their interest, they could find stories for themselves, and they are likely to enjoy it. And then we could also, for higher level students, we could have personal reflection. And we talked already about cultural comparison before. Okay, now here it is taxonomy Bloom. Now, big issue here. I received quite a few requests to become a PhD supervisor from Indonesia. And they write their proposal. The question that they produce tend to be just what question, which is at level of remembering, understanding. Very rarely we could create, goes to creating a new knowledge, a proposal for a difficult question based on a review of literature. Now, my research in Australia find that the students tend to be having the most difficult things is to analyze the result of their research here. So by using literature, we can try to ask a higher level questions by using the literature materials. For example, comparing their own story, or contrasting, criticizing, and so on. And we can also go up, you know, using the question words 5W1H plus yes or no questions. Okay. Authentic materials, yes. Back to the story that we just saw, we can ask students what a street vendor say, you know, when offering his or her merchandise. how a person respond to an offer to help, what a person say when asking for something, and so on and so forth. So literature can spice up our teaching, can make our student engaged and involved, which is in line with JBSA. Just quickly, how does the teaching using literature satisfy the emphasis and methods of teaching in our 213 curriculum? This is from Hakim to 2017, when he compared the 206 curriculum and the 213 curriculum. The philosophy, as all of you from Indonesia knows, that the emphasis of the 213 curriculum is on developing character, dignified character, and civilized character. And then also the emphasis is on competence as a means of communication to express ideas and knowledge. Now, here how we can do with the literature, with the interest. This is just a quick summary. And then students are made to read and understand meaning. Then we can do story is interesting, create generate curiosity, can be asked a variety of factual questions or high level questions. Then students can be made used to writing their own text. They can write a plot, for example, that are similar to or different from what they have learned. They can do it if we have taught them elements of a short story. For example, the characters, the setting, the plot, the conflict, themes, and the resolutions. Students can follow this structure to develop their own story. And then we can ask them to write a story. The above structure can be explained and discussed to them, of course. This is regarding the aturan text, yeah. And then students can be made to express themselves. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of things that we can ask the student to do to express themselves using literature material, or up to us to be, the keywords from Professor Adel before was creative, yeah. Our creativity to produce tasks that generate students' involvement. So the conclusion, sorry, Ira, just quick one. We had a problem before in our language teaching, which need to be addressed crucially. And then we have the curriculum aims that need to be satisfied. Now, both problems can be addressed. Sorry, there's a grammar there, by using literature materials, short stories in this case, with creative and appropriate teaching technique, like questioning, varied tasks, and so on. Using literature products can spice up our teaching to solve problem one, and satisfy the aims of the 213 curriculum in terms of both developing competence and forming dignified characters as the basis of our curriculum. The three inhibiting factors that we mentioned before can also be overcome. Therefore, if we want to be happy with the result of our teaching and satisfied, we should urge ourselves to use it where possible. Thank you. Any question?
Okay, thank you, Prof. This is a very interesting topic, yeah, how to use literature in the learning process. Okay, there are three questions for you, Prof. The first one is the question from Risang Baskara. Prof Z, how do we balance the spices so that the food we produce can be a good diet for the students during the pandemic not only for K-12 but also for higher education? Should they be canonical works from the canonical authors? In the era of new media, should we also include graphic novel and other forms of digital literature? Thank you. That the first questions. And the second one is from Selfie Mariati. Dear Professor Zifirdaus, how to include the literature in learning process while we are now have been stuck in the existing syllabus by the government? Like which the topic to be taught are also centered and structured. Thank you. And the last one is from Bu Maria Crystalline, dear Professor Zifridaus. As we know that there are 4 genres in literature, so could you give me the suggestions what the best genre should be applied according to each level, from the lowest to the highest level? Thank you. That's the
Wow.
questions from the participant, Prof.
Thank you. So how do we balance between what I missed the first one?
How do we balance between spices so that the food we produce can be a good diet for the students?
Okay. Well, I think we already gone through that. The first the important thing is, of course, for the teacher to go through what they're available on the internet regarding the stories. The food is the stories, right? So as we saw the example before, there are many stories there that we can select, and we can adapt to the age of the students. Now, of course, we are guided by the curriculum that we need to address, of course. It is here that the teachers need to try to see how the materials on the internet can be suitable for the material in the syllabus. So how? Well, it's up to us to be creative. Go to the internet, look at the many different stories, look at your curriculum, which one, you can do it as a whole, gradually, or depending on the length, of course. You can cut it into pieces. The second one,
the second question, how to include the literature in learning process while we are now have been stuck in the existing syllabus by the government.
Yes, that's the same answer again. If the time, well, first is to try to see how we can adjust between the materials or the grammar points that need to be taught, right? And you have the material. You need to make some a matching first, of course, as I said before. It depends on the time, of course. This is an issue as well, but we are lucky now. There's no more national exam, which was very daunting for teachers before. Yeah. We need to make the adjustment to find the stories and how it can be suitable for the materials. If that's not possible, I think it is possible, at least by cutting it into pieces as a real example. But the student can also do things outside the class, of course. There's also time for extracurricular, right? So this can be done during that time as well. Now the next one is
the last questions.
Genre. Is that right?
Yeah, genre. There are 4 genres in literature. So what the best genre should be applied according to each level, from the lowest to the highest?
Yeah. Again, it depends. We need to look at the curriculum again, and for lower level, the short stories like what we just showed can be used, I suppose, because it has a basic, it has some basic function there. How to greet people, how to, how to offer help, and how to appreciate what people have done for you, and so on. How to gain your interest, how to sell things, and so on. Now, we don't have to choose a particular genre because of the level, because the language would be a different. Like short stories, for example, there are difficult short stories, there are easy short stories, so gender doesn't matter in that case. Poetry as well, there's a poetry that can be easily understood, and there are other very highly abstract short stories. Novel, maybe novels too long, but there is a short one. So as far as I'm concerned, genres is not an issue. It is the level of the length and the level of difficulties of the language and the issues being discussed in each of the genres. Any other questions?
No more, Prof.
No more?
No more.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending and for listening. And I hope I have present something that is useful for you all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Z, for the presentation. It is a very interesting topic about literature studies. And as the teachers, we have to be able to create the teachings by using literatures in our classroom. And the last session, we would like to invite the third keynote speakers, Mr. Professor Safnil, MA, PhD. Before we begin, I would like to read the curriculum vitae of Prof. Safnil. He is the head of study program for master degree of English educations, and there are some researches that have been done by the professor. The last one is boosting the publications of Indonesian research. It is a international research, and also there are some experiences in publication, especially in national and also international publisher. I cannot read one by one because we have limited times, and we would like to invite Prof. Safnil to introduce himself. To Professor Safnil, time is yours. Thank you.
Can you hear me, everybody?
Yes.
Can everybody hear me? Through the Zoom? Okay, thank you very much. I take this occasion to thank you, Nabila, and also Professor Ifrudal Sadnan, for being able to give lecture presentation for our first ICOTEL seminar. And hopefully we'll have another international seminar or conference for next year. I promise you that I will have a short presentation so we can finish this event by 12. So my title is very focused. This is about argument style and linguistic features of research article discussion, a comparative study among Indonesian, local, national, and international journals. I did a study with two students from the postgraduate education program, Fira Widyarti and Mega Putri Wulandari. We know now that international publication is very important for lecturers, for scholars. Without international publication, we cannot be a professor, we cannot apply for proposal or funding, research funding to the Indonesian government. But unfortunately, Indonesian scholars in social sciences and humanities are hello, can you hear me? Can somebody hear me?
I can hear you, Prof. Sarnil.
Now? Okay, thank you very much.
Not clear enough, sir.
So
The sound is just like echo behind you. Mendenging.
Okay, what about now? Is it okay now?
Yeah, bit clearer.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me go on. I start from this point again. Unfortunately, Indonesian scholars in social sciences and humanities are unsuccessful in international journal publication. Compare them to the scholars in other fields like sciences, medical, and engineering. And this the so this is the evidence. This is the evidence that from the data in 2016, scholars in engineering publish articles 50.14%, medicine 10.64%, computer science 10.2%, and social sciences only 4.74%, and arts and humanities less than 1%. So why? Why is the publication of social science and humanities scholars in Indonesia far below the scholars in other fields? Some possible causes occur. Many are unsuccessful because they are not resilient enough. They often stop when the drug is rejected by journal. And the heart so they don't want to write the articles. So when we stop after getting rejection, and then that's the end of it. A small number of journals available in social sciences and humanities, true, poor English ability, as Zikr Dalsana mentioned in one of his articles, that Indonesian people who are excellent at high school grades, graduates, they don't go to social sciences and humanities departments or faculties in university. They often go to sciences, engineering, medical. So usually these scholars are better than scholars in social sciences and humanities. Few free resources on the internet, but now it is much better. So we can access more sources in the internet for our writing process. And also the problem of culture. We are not familiar with criticizing other people, or we are not. We think that it is not polite to criticize other people's work, and then very different academic practices from those of international. At international level, people are very competitive and they are familiar with the competitiveness, of publication. But in Indonesia, since there are many journals and not many people who write articles, so publishing in national journals is not very competitive. So as I mentioned before, we compared three journals. One is a local journal. It is not accredited yet as a national journal, EduLink. So we took 20 articles, and we also took 20 articles from national accredited journals in three world, and we took 20 articles from IJAL, International Journal, International Reputable Journal, all published in Indonesia. And we don't mean to generate the generalized data because these regionals, of course, cannot represent. There are many other journals, especially at national accredited journals and then non-accredited journals. So we look at here, we only look at the discussion section, not the other section. So when we look at the number of words, the average number of words from local journals is less than 2,000, and even the national journal is a little over 1,000, and we look at the international journals, it is more than 3,000 words. So very significant difference in terms of the in terms of the length of the discussion section in number of words. And also, we look at the number of references used by the authors to discuss the findings. Yeah, so very significant difference. In EduLink, we found the average only 5 references cited in the discussion section. In Joel, only 3, and in IJAL 18 references. Yeah? So the more references used to discuss the findings, the more convincing the argument in the discussion. I found this morning, I got a dissertation from Udi Samanudi, who graduated from Belfast University. He did a study on the same section of a recent article, but he got it from a high-ranked international journals like Applied Linguistics, ISO 430, Studies in Second Language Acquisition, and also look at the average size of the discussion section, 4,682 words. Out of the average length of the article is about over 7,000. So almost 50% of the article is the discussion section. So this Samanudi, Udi Samanudi from Queen's University Belfast. He is from Tangerang, from Puntirta. Well, this is our finding, our first finding. The argument in the discussion section, we identified 5 arguments. Number 1 is interpreting the result. And number 2, explaining or elaborating the result. Number 3, suggesting the possible causes of the finding or result. Number 4, giving an illustration, to make it clear about the result. And number 5, relating the research finding to the finding of previous studies. And we look at here, strategy number 1 is equally frequent in these 3 groups of articles. But look at number 2, number 3, number 4, and also number 5. So quite very few. In local journals, the only frequent strategy is strategy number 1, interpreting the results. But the other strategies are very infrequent in this discussion section, and also for national journals. So in these 5 strategies, international journals articles are superior. So, so our first conclusion is that the 5 strategies can be indicators to see how good discussion section is in journal article. Now we look at Udi Samanhudi's, this from Young and Allison. I took it from Udi Samanhudi's dissertation. So he has another strategy for discussion section. That is step 4, evaluating the result. So this is not in our strategy. Yeah? So we only have 5 strategies, but this is another one, evaluating the result. This is the example. Yeah? Interpreting the research finding or results. This example, based on both opinions, it can be inferred that the genre process approach can develop student skills in writing, involve students about knowledge. We took this from Edulin. Yeah? Since Edulin is not accredited yet, maybe the process of reviewing is not very maximum. So this example of interpretation. Example number 2 is elaborating, that is explaining more about the research finding. We took this from ICOTEL journal article. Another example of strategy 3, suggesting the possible causes. Yeah. Meanwhile, the level of student self-confidence after oral recitation is moderately high because they are more confident in performing. Usually, the authors use the word hedging, such as probably before, yeah, or because they may be more confident. Yeah. So this is a typical language for possible causes. And giving an illustration, this if the finding is complicated, so we need to elaborate this and to give illustration, yeah, to make it more easily to be understood. And the last one is relating the research finding to the finding of previous relevant studies. Yeah? So we compare it whether it is similar, it is different, or even contradictory. Our second analysis is on the use of citation style. Yeah? And we also found a significant difference in local and national journals. The majority of the citation style is integral citation. But in international journals, the majority, the dominant style of citation is non-integral citation. Yeah? So, is an example. This is the example of integral citation where the author, the cited author, is put at the beginning of the sentence. Yeah? But the non-integral citation, the source, the author, the cited author, is written at the end of the sentence. So the difference is to put where the author, the cited author is, where we put the names of the author. At the beginning, as a subject, or at the end, yeah, not belong to the sentence, not included in the sentence. So the difference is more international journal authors use non-integral. So this one, yeah, more international authors use a non-integral station, while the national and local authors use the integral like this. Yeah. So what is the difference? Yeah. Other than the type, the difference is what is more important for us, the people that we cite or the idea. So if we consider the authors that we cite is more important, we use the integral citation. But when we consider the information we cite is more important, and that we use the non-integral citation. Okay. Another case that we investigated is the use of tenses, and we also found a significant difference. Yeah? Local journals use present tense more frequently. National journals past tense. Yeah. Sorry. In the term of the use of tenses, the 3 journals are similar. They use present tense and past tense more frequently than the other tenses, like present perfect tense or future tense. Yeah? So they are similar in the use of tenses. The use of present tense when we cite information that we consider it is already general knowledge. It is not a new finding, not a new information. But when we cite a research finding of someone and then we use past tense. So again, when we cite general knowledge or theory and then we use present tense. But when we cite research finding, then we use past tense. This example, present tense, and then past tense, present perfect tense, and then future tense. Then the last aspect we investigated is the use of interactive meta-discourse markers, and we also found significant difference. Look at the total. Local journals use 334 interactive meta-discourse markers. National journals use 215 meta-discourse markers, while international journals use 1,181 interactive meta-discourse markers in the discussion section. And this is because the discussion section in the international journal is longer, as I mentioned before, compared to the other group of articles. So these are the examples of interactive meta-discourse markers: transition, frame markers, metaphoric markers, evidential, and quote glosses. Now, our conclusion. So from the result and discussion, it can be concluded that in general, the discussion section of international journals, ICOTEL, is far superior to EduLink, local, and JOL, national journals, in terms of the number of words, references, the use of argument strategies, and the type of citation. This implies that ICOTEL authors have successfully, or better, more successfully, complied with the academic writing convention for the discussion section of international journal articles. On the other hand, EduLink local and national journal articles may have represented, may have represented the writing style of convention used in the Indonesian academic writing context, especially in writing the discussion section of a journal article, while the ICOTEL articles represent international journals and they have complied with the convention of international journal writing. Limitation of the study, of course. This study, however, only used articles from 3 purposefully selected journals. For example, these journals cannot represent other journals published in Indonesia, of course, in the field of English education or applied linguistics, because there are only journals, accredited national journals in applied linguistics in Indonesia, and of course, it cannot be represented by only one journal. So therefore, the result of this study should be evaluated by further study using more articles from more journals published in Indonesia in the same field. This is to obtain a more representative data to see the similarity and differences of argument strategies and linguistic realization found in the discussion section of the journal article. Implication. Although not representative, the finding of this study have some implication. First, local and national journals authors should write a longer discussion using more references to support the findings to be more convincing. Of course, use more strategies, not just one strategy. Second, local and national authors should use a non-integral citation format more frequently than integral citation to comply with the international convention in citing others' work in academic writing. Third, local and national journal authors should use all 5 argument strategies in their discussion section as international authors do to be more convincing, especially when writing articles for international journals publication. And finally, local and national authors should use more interactive meta-discourse markers. If they do so, the manuscript has a better chance to be accepted by a reputable international journal. I think that's all for me. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Prof. There are two questions from Risang Baskara and also from Pak Ahmad Nasihin. The first question is, considering non-technical problems in research article, do you think that the issue is also related to how the writer, especially less experienced authors, identify themselves in the discourse community, as well as conforming to the conventions or expectations of the community? How to address this so we can have a better academic ecosystem, not only for the young academic, but also for the students? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, let me answer the first question first. Yeah. There are many aspects that are involved in this. The first is the experience of the authors, of course, and I guess that the articles published in local and national journals, especially low-ranked national journals, in the 4, 5, yes, in the 4, in the 3, but it must be much better in Sinta 2 and Sinta 1, of course. And the second one is the process of reviewing and editing in the journal. Since there are so many journals in Indonesia and not many people who write articles or active members of the discourse community and journals, some journals find it hard to find articles. So because they have to publish on time, then they are under pressure to publish the available articles. So they don't take time to revise, to edit the articles. It's different from international journals like ICOTEL. They have hundreds of articles waiting to be published. So they are not under pressure. They have much time to spend to revise, sometimes 3, 4 times the article, to return back to the authors to be revised. I think it doesn't, the case is different from the local and national journals. Yeah. And the other one, yeah, probably the convention, yeah, the journals are not, those are different convention. So the organizers of the journals, I think, yeah, they are not very experienced and they are not familiar with the conventions of a standard journal article, especially for discussion. They may use the same convention with the ones used for thesis or publication, while they are very different. They are very different. So there are many aspects contributing to the fact that the local and national journals are very different, in the discussion section than the international journals like ICOTEL. ICOTEL is published in Bandung, UPI Bandung, and the majority of the authors are Indonesian. So the same authors, all are Indonesian, but the product is different because they use different convention, they have they experience different processes of publication, and yeah, they have a different guidelines, yeah, for publication. Okay,
Okay, thank you, Prof. The second question from Mr. Ahmad Nasin, dear Professor Safnil, how about ethic in discussion when we show the differences, keep or wrong previous research? It is quite impolite in Indonesia.
Yeah, we of course in writing purpose we have to be polite. Yeah, it is okay to say that our finding is different from the finding of previous study. Yeah, in a polite way. Yeah, and suggest the possible causes. Yeah, not just mentioning my finding is very different from the finding of X and X and Y, for example. Yeah. We cannot stop there. We have to mention what are the possible causes. Is it because we use a different method? Or is it because we studied a different object or what? Yeah? So it is okay, so no problem, yeah, to mention that my finding is different from the other findings, or even contradictory. Yeah? So we don't say that other people's research is false, yeah, or wrong, mentioned here, to compare or even to contrast our finding with the finding of other people in our discussion. Okay.
There's no more questions. Okay, thank you, Prof. I think for the audience, that's all the end of this conference. And thank you so much for Prof. Adelina, Prof. Z, and also Prof. Safnil for very awesome presentations. And it's very helpful for us. So I can conclude that as the researchers and also as teachers, we have to be creative and also innovative. So it will help also us to publish our articles at the end of the research or teachings, yeah, as the postgraduate program. And thank you so much also for the presenters and also the participants. And I'm sorry for everything, for any mistakes. And I say alhamdulillah, because Allah helped us for today. So there is no much interference in this conference. And this is very happy for me to guide this conference. And we say Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I would like to back to the host, Mr. Adin. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our last agenda is taking picture together by this Zoom meeting. For all participants, please turn on your camera and don't forget to smile. Okay. For all participants, please turn on your camera.
Izinkan ku lukis senja, melukis nama kisah.
Okay. Enough? Okay, for the first slide. Satu, dua. Okay, next slide. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Third slide. 1, 2, 3. Next slide. 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. Go. Okay, next.
Next slide. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Next.
Next.
1, 2, 3. Okay, there are so many slides. Next slide. 1, 2, 3.
No video. Show.
Okay, next 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Udah satu berapa? Okay. Okay, finish. Thank you. Okay. For all presenters who want to publish article on proceeding, for all participants who want to publish article on proceeding, the deadline of full paper on the 30th of October 2020, and the proceeding will be published on November 2020. For all participants, don't forget to submit your attendance and subscribe the YouTube channel of MPBing University of Bengkulu as the requirements for getting certificate. The certificate will be given one day after this event. That's all our agenda in the first international conference on the teaching of English and literature 2020. Let's close this event by saying Hamdallah. Finally, from the deep of my heart, I do apologize for my mistake while presenting this event. Thank you very much for your attention and see you on the International Conference on the Teaching of English and Literature University of Bengkulu next year. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for all speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you for the committee.
Thank you so much all.
Pak Delen masih di sini? Belum ya? May po ko, Dwi? Baru jadi. Video profil.
Di balik hijaunya tanah Sumatera, membentang dari utara hingga selatan. Garis pantai sepanjang mata memandang. Bengkulu menjadi rumah bagi beragam etnis dan budaya. Rumah bagi beragam hayati, flora langka non-eksotik. Keberagaman yang dimiliki Bengkulu menjadikannya unik, tak dapat dijumpai dimanapun. Berangkat dari pendirian Provinsi Bengkulu tahun 1968, mengharuskan berdirinya sebuah perguruan tinggi negeri. Dengan semangat tak kenal lelah, perjuangan dan dukungan dari setiap elemen, 1982 berdirilah Universitas Negeri pertama di Bengkulu. Universitas Bengkulu, lembaga pendidikan tinggi terbesar di Bengkulu, memiliki peran penting demi menjaga dan mengembangkan segala potensi yang ada. Dari bumi Rafflesia, Universitas Bengkulu menghasilkan sumber daya manusia berkarakter, berwawasan kemajuan, dan berdaya saing. Cita-cita besar perguruan tinggi ini diwujudkan dengan pengembangan keilmuan yang berbasis pada kebutuhan zaman. Fasilitas perkuliahan didirikan menjawab tantangan cepatnya perkembangan. Kualitas tenaga pendidik terus ditingkatkan sebab dunia harus ditaklukkan. Mengembangkan pendidikan dan penelitian merupakan misi besar bagi kami. Mendorong sivitas akademika menghasilkan karya berstatus hak atas kekayaan intelektual. Melaksanakan pengabdian sesuai dengan kebutuhan masyarakat lokal hingga internasional, serta mengembangkan sistem tata kelola universitas yang baik merupakan hal mutlak demi visi World Class University. Di era milenial ini, kami memahami pendidikan bukan hanya sebagai media untuk menimba ilmu, namun juga sebagai wadah pembentukan karakter manusia, manusia yang kompetitif, ingin belajar, dan memahami apa yang diinginkan dunia. Dari ruang-ruang kelas, kami mempersiapkan generasi terbaik. Generasi emas yang memiliki semangat kompetitif membara. Dari ruang-ruang kelas, kami mengembangkan ilmu untuk kami abdikan kepada bangsa dan tanah air tercinta. Universitas ini merupakan muara bagi pencari ilmu dari berbagai penjuru, datang dari segala pelosok negeri, bahkan luar negeri. Di tempat ini, kami saling bertukar pikiran, memahami satu sama lain, hingga tercipta harmoni yang indah. Dari sini, kami menciptakan karya. Kami tuangkan dari ide-ide kreatif setiap pribadi diramu menjadi satu. Disinilah kami mengembangkan segala potensi diri, bebas berekspresi, menyatukan persepsi dalam perbedaan. Bagi kami, sangat penting untuk membangun jaringan agar terkoneksi satu sama lain, sehingga pergerakan zaman dapat dilampaui sejalan dengan visi kami. Rentetan prestasi di berbagai ajang adalah pembuktian diri. Bagi kami, perkuliahan berarti menentukan sebuah masa depan Bengkulu, dan masa depan Indonesia. Kami ingin mempersiapkan bekal terbaik, menyongsong Indonesia baru yang kuat dan mandiri. Tanggung jawab kami sebagai generasi penerus harus direalisasikan. Kami wujudkan dengan pengabdian kepada masyarakat. Dari sinilah kami mempersiapkan diri menghadapi dunia baru, membangun masa depan, menggapai mimpi yang diidamkan, menyambut cita yang diharapkan. Dari sini, dari Bengkulu, untuk Indonesia menggapai dunia.